Welcome to PlayStation Corner, my name is Alex and today we're looking at Scars Above on the PS5, a third-person sci-fi action shooter. It's been touting a decent challenge as well as a unique alien world to conquer, but can it deliver on these ideas? Well, that's what we're here to find out, so let's get started. If you enjoyed the video today, consider hitting subscribe, helps the channel a huge amount, and we have reviews for both PS5 and VR2 games, as well as deals weekly. Story, and we're taking on the role of Dr. Kate Ward, a member of the Sentient Contact Assessment and Response Team, or SCAR for short. It's a team of scientists and engineers, and in this case, this mission, we've been sent to investigate a mysterious alien structure that has appeared in Earth's orbit. Now on approach, things they go wrong. It transports us to a mysterious planet. When we awake, we are alone, the ship is a wreck, the crew they are gone, and now we must get out there and uncover the truth behind the structure and of course find the rest of the crew. I enjoyed the story. It can be a little obvious at times with some of its twists, but generally I thought it was a unique location, and the character of Kate, I did find her to be an interesting one. Gameplay then under this one, as I said, it's a third-person sci-fi action shooter with the occasional dash of horror as well, although I would say it's not scary, rather just the theme of many of the locations and the enemies that we must face. It promised in the lead up to launch a challenging experience, and many were also quick to point out its potential Souls-like elements. Now to address those two areas, difficulty-wise on normal, it was never too bad and you can choose from 3 levels. Then the Souls-like elements, it's very minimal, in very minimal ways. You know, we can unlock shortcuts to stamina that's impacted by melee attacks and sprinting, and then the checkpoints, they restore health and ammo, but it is at the cost of restoring all foes around you. So our main method of defense here, then, it's known as Thera, a gunner that starts off opening the game as simply a scientific tool, but with progression, we'll be unlocking a number of attachments. The gunplay, it's elemental based, and eventually we will have electric, fire, ice, and toxic. The combat has some good ideas. Enemies are weak to specific attacks, and they often double up to help you with progression. Think freezing water to walk over it, or electrocuting the water to attack multiple enemies at once. These upgrades, they're often found scattered around the world or on particularly big enemies or boss encounters. What I really liked with the gunplay was the fact it's often going to ask you to combine them and switch on the fly. So for example, all enemies have a weak spot, so maybe you're going to freeze them, slowing them down before unloading an electrical clip into that sweet spot. It's not redefining a genre, that is for sure, but it feels well thought out. Bosses are a particular highlight as well, as they really do try to dial up the challenge, and each is going to be tactical rather than simply unloading bullets. Think a tank who seems unstoppable unless you break the ice under their feet to freeze them on the spot. It's really often figuring out how you overcome their immense power using what's to hand and what is around you. The controls for the gunplay as well is solid. It's the usual setup: aim with the left trigger, shoot with the right, but some weapons will vary this, such as the fire-based attachment. This has a very short charge up time before you can go ahead and fire. We also then get a decent selection of gadgets to assist as well, as some defensive, others to take enemies down. Think a grenade that contains highly flammable liquids, one which slows down enemies thanks to gravitational pull, health kits, and even then generating more ammo. My favourite was a device which distracted an enemy with a projection of yourself so you could move into optimal placement, such as when enemies have their weak spots on their back. A skill tree then also comes into play. We can upgrade both her weapons or gadgets as well as Kate directly, and you do this by conducting research on enemies or the world itself, or by collecting up purple orbs that are scattered around. This is for me where the game starts to struggle. It feels tacked on, if anything, because initially it's kind of this slow burn, as it should be, but by the halfway point these orbs are absolutely everywhere, as it's almost rushing you to level up in preparation for that end game. I get this feeling here that this game was perhaps intended to be something longer, but what we ended up with was a game that took me right around 6 hours. That also includes me getting stuck on this environmental puzzle where you had to collect up batteries, and that in turn actually highlighted another issue for me. There is no map in this game, and I do feel like it would have benefited from one, because there's always a waypoint on screen guiding you to that next step, so why not give me a map as well to assist? It's not just the skill tree that starts slow and then goes into overdrive either, it's the same with weapons. It's slow and makes sense, and then all of a sudden you're getting a new gun attachment or gadget every 10 minutes. It's almost like they were building the game and then all of a sudden they decided we need this to launch ASAP, let's get things wrapped up. You also see flashes of good ideas that the game can't quite capitalize on. In one moment you'll be shooting icicles from the ceiling to crush enemies, it feels epic, but the idea of using the world against your enemies rarely actually appears. It also has these almost hallucinogenic scenarios, but on a couple of occasions when I came out of it, I was in a dead end or toe-to-toe with an enemy for a cheap hit that they could land on me. By the end game then as well, you quickly start to notice these enemies are actually repeating, but with a reskin to give them the impression they are different. Finally, for the end game then, even with its short runtime, it's actually forcing you to revisit 3 of the locations that you traversed to open the game, and that feels a little cheap because to that point, even with flaws, I was having fun, but then it felt like a bit of a chore having to go back and also somewhat anticlimactic, even though it did transport you there automatically. The big reason I said to open as well, it's not really got that much souls in it, is because up until this point, you've been pushing forward constantly on a very linear path with the occasional, branching pathway. When you do go back, you realize there's really not much here to see. It's a game that has a lot of moments where you're going to feel like they're onto a good idea here, but they fail to really explore it in any meaningful way. For example, a sequence where you are in the cold hypothermia is a threat noted by a bar at the bottom of the screen, but they pick the idea up for 5 minutes, and like most of the other ideas, they put it down again just shortly after. These ideas, they deserve more development. Basically, it's a game where it's easy to see the potential, and a few systems are absolutely solid, but I just can't shake that feeling this one has been a rush job. Graphically, it's interesting. I like the enemy designs, especially the boss encounters. There's also some unique locations like fog-covered wilderness and icy mountains. There's also some nice visual effects for weapons and animations for attacks. Sadly though, it's definitely feeling a little last gen. Kate is an incredibly stiff lead, and there's some notable popping as well. It's not necessarily a bad looking game, it's just where it truly starts to show the, lower budget it's working with. A good example of this is Kate ends up in water a lot in this game, but this never impacts her clothing, something that Uncharted famously added, and I kind of expect that now in 2023. I also really didn't like the lighting in this game. The characters don't look like they are in the world at times, and locations, they just don't feel right. Caves are light, for example, though there's clearly no light source that can be spotted in the environment. I also noticed with cutscenes then, they're of a varying quality. Some are solid, but others, they seem to have a noticeable hit to the resolution. Audio finally, and I was impressed with the voice work. I think the cast did a really good job here. Given they're not working with a massive budget, I thought this cast was talented and each were believable in their core roles. They just delivered a story that can get a little crazy at times, and they absolutely sold it. Guns sound good too, with each element having its own accompanying audio design. The music though, less impressive. It is fine, but it feels very paint by numbers for the genre. So overall, A Scars Above kicks things off in a strong way. The story is intriguing, it clearly defines a goal we can get behind, and the slow burn of gradually unlocking new weapons and skills, it's absolutely rewarding, especially when it's tied to overcoming screen-filling bosses or tougher encounters. Sadly though, around the halfway mark, it feels like there's a rush to get things done. It starts to fill the world with ammo and pickups, and it's actually a little overwhelming how much it's throwing at you all in one go. There's just so many moments where they have a good idea and then just throw it away 10 minutes later to never see it return, and that's a shame because it's truly a game, as I've said multiple times, where you can see the potential. Then though, it's over in around 6 hours, and the end game, it's going to ask you to go back to locations that you've already visited. And yeah, sure, like there's a little something new here and there in these locations, but that's rarely a rewarding design, especially when you factor in how short this game is. Look, I still had fun with it. In fact, I hope we see more of this world because there's some really interesting ideas in here, but I hope they commit to the more intentional pace of the opening of this game throughout the entirety of any sort of follow-up. Today, it's an average 5 out of 10 from me. There's just too many ideas that don't quite reach their potential to give this one a solid recommendation. Also, there's just so many good sci-fi experiences out there right now that should get your attention first, and namely, or at least most recently, Dead Space and Returnal. Will you be checking out Scars Above then? Let me know in the comments with that. Hit subscribe, join us here for reviews and deals weekly. It's PS5 and VR2 content, and I'll see you all on the next video. Thanks everyone.